I've switched to Microsoft Paint because I want to make some notes. We're reaching to a point, an important point, so I want to make some notes about these options that you see here. Okay, so the first one that we want to talk about is whether or not an item is relevant for picking. Now, by default, all items are actually relevant for picking, but what this actually means is whether or not you want to confirm the picking quantity or you don't. And by doing this, what you're saying is whether or not the picking is a two-step process. And to understand this, first of all, what you need to understand is that when you do the goods issue, at the time of goods issue, the system will compare the pick quantity with the delivery quantity. So let's make a note of this because it's quite important. So when you do the goods issue, the picking quantity must equal the delivery quantity. It's two separate fields at the time of doing the goods issue. So why would the quantities be different? Or when would you use the two-step picking process and the one-step picking process? Okay, by default, if I am picking in IM, in inventory management, I would usually say that an item is not relevant for picking. And the reason is that in IM, I go away, I print my pick list, I pick my products, I bring it back, and I update my picking by updating the delivery quantity. It's the most easiest way to do it. Because if you have a difference and the item is not relevant for picking, then you only have one field to update, which is the delivery quantity. If the item is relevant for warehouse management or transfer order, then I would say it's relevant for picking. And the reason why is that once you create the delivery, you then can create the transfer order. And when you confirm the transfer order with a particular quantity, you can then say update that quantity into the delivery quantity. And that makes sure that when you do the goods issue, the delivery quantity is equal to the picking quantity. Okay, so to summarize, whether or not you should turn off the picking flag. Simple rule of thumb. If it's IM, turn off valid for picking, because if not, if you had a difference in picking, you would have to update the picking quantity and the delivery quantity manually. If you have WM, transfer orders, then you would turn on picking, and if there is a difference, use the transfer order to update the delivery quantity and the picking quantity. Then we have the option called storage location required. And this means that when you create the delivery, you must have a storage location. Or if you don't flag it, then when you create the delivery, you don't need it. And you would only turn it off if you determine the storage location or if it's populated after the delivery creation, i.e. later. And why would you do that? Or why would you have it on? Because you want to make sure that the storage location that's in the delivery is correct when you do the PGI. So when you do the PGI, the system will always check the storage location because it needs to reduce stock. What this flag does is check whether or not the storage location has been populated when you create the delivery. Next, you have the option of determine storage location. And this always usually goes as a business logic with the storage location required, and don't check storage location. So determine storage location means, well, when you create the delivery, determine the storage location, and there's a rule for that. Yeah, so by default I always say storage location is required and determine storage location. So why would you do this? Why would you want to turn off storage location required and determine storage location? There's only really one business case to do this, which is when you determine the storage location either manually by a human being or sometimes you have an external system that does your picking for you, it might then determine the storage location and repopulate it in the delivery. So in that case, you can turn it off. And as I said, I made a note here, you would only turn it off if it's truly required. For the no batch check, what it means is when I enter a batch number, do I check it, see if it's valid or not? And you could say no batch check if you plan to create the batches after you do your picking. For example, you create the batch later. The automatic batch determination is if you create a material, the system will go back and determine the batches. Next, we have the text determination procedure. That's grayed out because it's configured somewhere else. And lastly, the standard text. And this standard text is actually used in the forms. If you put a value in there, it will tell you the rule of how do you determine the standard text that you could use in the form. So finally, let's revisit the incomplete procedure. Now, in the sales order lecture, we've seen this already. But it's important for us to have a look at it to see how it's applied in the delivery to strengthen our knowledge. As we said before, the incomplete procedure is used to determine if there are missing fields in the delivery and to highlight that either as a warning or an error. And what we want to do by default is to have the same rules. If in the sales order something is incomplete, it gives you an error. In the delivery, again, if that field is blank, it would give an error also. Now, you would say, well, if I always catch it in the sales order, why do I need to catch it in the delivery? Well, if you created, for example, a delivery from a stock transport order, then obviously you don't have those rules. So that's why it's important to have the same rules as in the sales order and the delivery, because for stock transport orders or subcontracting orders, you also want to apply the same rules. In this case, you can either choose to make a warning or an error, but remember, when you do the PGI, the system internally checks some fields. If you don't have that, the system stops. That's why we want to have the incomplete procedure either at the delivery creation stage or after the delivery has been created, to prompt the users to say, look, watch out. Before you do the PGI, you really want to see what these errors are. So let's have a look at the configuration. It's in shipping. So it's under shipping. It's here, shipping. Under logistic execution, it's shipping, basic shipping functions. And if we look at incomplete control for deliveries, we have the defined, assigned. So let's have a look at the definition of the incomplete procedure. It's the same as the sales order. So you can see here, you have the sales order item on the top, and you can see the delivery header here. So let's have a look at the procedure. Standard SAP has a few, minimum delivery, maximum deliveries. Let's have a look at the first one here, maximum deliveries. Then I can see, again, it applies all of the missing fields based on the header fields, and you can see here all of the missing fields that the system will check. The rules is still the same, the logic is still the same as in the incomplete procedure in the sales order. Yeah, so the logic is still the same. I'm not going to go through it. Just know that it exists. And finally, we have the delivery block. Why would you apply a delivery block in the delivery? Well, the concept is as follows. You want the delivery block to apply in the sales order, not really in the delivery. Because once you create a delivery, you want a smooth process. You don't want to really stop it. You don't really want to apply a delivery block at all. You want to catch everything in the sales order. But if you ever to use a delivery block in a delivery, it can be done manually in most cases. Yeah, and the reason you would do manually is for some reason you want to stop the delivery. So for example, if you see a big error, sometimes usually for export you need extra paperwork or something like that. It can't be processed. You would put a delivery block, you would stop it from being processed some more until you resolve that issue, then you remove the delivery block. Yeah. Now it's quite rare to actually do this, because in a logistics process, always remember, it's a repetitive process again and again. For all the deliveries, you want to create one simple, straightforward logistics, outbound logistics process, and you don't want too many deviations. So having to block a delivery creates extra complications that you don't really want the warehouse to manage. That's why we always say apply the delivery block in the sales order before you create a delivery. And the concept is once you create the delivery, you assume everything is clear, then you go straight forward, pick, pack, and ship. Wow, that was a big lecture, but we're finally done. So, in closing, we've seen how to configure the item on the header level, how to configure the item category on the item level, obviously, what are the different options. We looked at the delivery block and the incomplete procedure. But before I want to finish, I just wanted to always make this note. What's important is to understand what the business wants, find the delivery type that is closest to it, right, and get them to try out standard SAP first. If they really don't like it, but of course create a new document type, but always create it with reference to the old SAP one, because SAP has its best practice and it also has implemented what it seems as those best practices into those document types. Okay, thank you.